In the bustling streets of Lagos, people rushed to work every morning. Amid the chaos sat an old beggar with torn clothes. No one noticed him, except to drop a coin or two. But behind those weary eyes hid an unusual intelligence. This was no ordinary beggar. He listened carefully to bankers passing by with briefcases. Their conversations about interest rates and loans fascinated him. Though uneducated, he memorized every detail. Each night, he thought about money like a chessboard. He dreamed of beating the system that ignored him. One evening, a banker dropped a torn notebook by mistake. The beggar picked it up and flipped through the pages. Inside were scribbles about loans, debts, and bank tricks. The beggar smiled. He had found his secret weapon. Knowledge would be his escape. With patience, he began practicing small calculations on paper scraps. He counted coins, tracked interest, and solved puzzles in his mind. Passers-by saw only a beggar, but inside he was training to fight the very system that enslaved the poor. He was turning knowledge into power. One day, he approached a young street vendor in debt. The vendor owed money to loan sharks, terrified of losing everything. The beggar advised him how to repay smartly. Within weeks, the vendor was free of debt. Word spread, the beggar knew secrets of money. Soon, workers, drivers, and shopkeepers came to him for advice. He explained interest like a teacher under the open sky. They repaid loans faster and avoided traps. The beggar had become the people's hidden banker. Yet he still wore rags. A journalist overheard his teachings and grew curious. He interviewed the beggar and published his story in the newspaper. "Homeless banker outsmarts the system," the headline screamed. Within days, the whole city knew his name. The beggar was now a legend. Banks laughed at first, dismissing him as a joke. But then they noticed their clients were leaving debt traps. Ordinary people were suddenly managing money better. The beggar had disrupted the balance of power, and the banks began to fear him. Instead of begging, people now offered him food and books. He devoured every page, hungry for more knowledge. From economics to banking history, he studied day and night. The beggar was no longer just surviving. He was building an empire in his mind. Finally, he approached a struggling community cooperative. He showed them how to pool savings and lend fairly. Within months, the group grew stronger than ever before. The beggar had created a people's bank. And this was only the beginning. The cooperative expanded rapidly as trust grew among villagers. Farmers, traders, and widows joined with their small savings. Loans were given without crushing interest. Families escaped poverty step by step. The beggar had turned hope into wealth. The banks sent spies to watch his methods. They were shocked at the simplicity of his system. No greed, no hidden charges, only fairness. The people loved him more each day. The banks began plotting his downfall. Officials summoned him to explain his work. He walked into the grand hall barefoot, still in rags. Crowds gathered, whispering as he entered. Even leaders couldn't believe a beggar had done this. But his voice carried confidence like a king. He spoke about fairness, dignity, and justice in money. He showed how banks trapped the poor in endless cycles. He offered a new vision built on unity. The hall fell silent at his words. History was being rewritten by a beggar. Instead of punishing him, the leaders applauded. They saw his wisdom as a gift for the nation. He was offered a position to guide financial reforms. The beggar who once begged for coins now advised men in power. With his guidance, small community banks spread everywhere. Markets flourished, farmers thrived, children went to school. The cycle of poverty began to break. People called him the people's banker. He was no longer invisible. But the big banks refused to stay silent. They launched campaigns to discredit him as a fraud. Newspapers published lies to ruin his reputation. He faced the biggest test of his journey. Would truth survive against money? Yet the people stood by his side. They marched in the streets chanting his name. Justice. Fairness. The people's banker, they cried. The banks had power, but he had trust. Trust was stronger than gold. The movement spread beyond his city. Neighboring countries heard of the beggar banker. He was invited to speak across Africa. Crowds filled stadiums to hear his wisdom. A beggar had become a voice for millions. But alone at night, he still slept on the floor. He never chased luxury or gold. His mission was never about wealth. It was about dignity for the forgotten. That was his true treasure. Invitations poured in from universities and world leaders. They wanted to learn from the man who defied banks. Airplanes carried him to distant nations. Yet everywhere he went, he dressed the same. Humble, simple, unchanged by fame. In New York, he stood before Wall Street giants. They mocked his accent and ragged clothes. But when he spoke, silence filled the hall. He exposed greed with piercing truth. The beggar silenced billionaires. Television screens broadcast his words worldwide. Money should serve people, not enslave them, he declared. Millions nodded as they listened in their homes. His message crossed borders and oceans. A revolution had begun. Back home, children were named after him. Songs were written about the beggar banker. He became a symbol of justice and wisdom. Even in slums, hope had a new face. His name lived in every heart. But his journey was never easy. Enemies still plotted to bring him down. They offered bribes, threats, and temptations. He refused them all with quiet strength. Integrity was his shield. One banker asked him, "Why not enjoy riches now?" The beggar smiled gently and replied, "I already have what money can't buy: wisdom, dignity, and the love of people. These were treasures no vault could hold." In his old age, he trained young leaders. He taught them to protect people from exploitation. Never let greed rule your hands, he warned. The next generation carried his flame. The movement would never die. When he finally passed away, the world mourned. Streets filled with candles and prayers. Villagers and presidents stood side by side. Not for a king, not for a billionaire, but for a beggar who changed the world. His cooperative banks still thrive across the continent. Families study, farmers grow, businesses rise. His dream lives on in every transaction. The beggar's spirit is present in every coin. He outsmarted banks and gave hope forever. And so, the man once ignored on the streets became the teacher of nations and protector of the poor. But the real question is, what do you take from his journey? Would you choose wealth, or would you choose wisdom? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to African Folktales Official for more unbelievable and inspiring stories.